Welcome to Top 10 DBA Mistakes Horror Stories Edition. Let me tell you a little bit about the event today. This is presented by SQL Sentry, and we have a lot of good things that you can get for free. Just want to mention off the top of our head that you can get a free copy of our extremely popular tool for query tuning called Plan Explorer. In addition to that, we have 3 ebooks now. Regularly $10 in the Kindle bookstore. You can get any of them or all of them for free if you will drop a note to sales@sqlsentry.com. Aaron is the main editor-in-chief on all of these, so great job, Aaron. Also wanted to mention that this is presented in conjunction with the SQL Cruise. And the SQL Cruise is something that Aaron and I are both happy to be participants in. I am going to be teaching in 2015 on the Caribbean SQL Cruise, and Aaron will be on the Mediterranean SQL Cruise later during the summer. We hope you can join us. It is such a great learning experience. It's wonderful learning and relaxation all at once. So go to sqlcruise.com to find out more details about it. All right, what are we talking about today? Well, this is a panel session, and so we are going to cover just a few things here and there on our top 10 list. The top 10 list, in case you haven't seen that separate presentation, goes into a great deal of problems that we see SQL Server DBAs make over and over again. You know, different things that they do that make their life miserable or make it much worse than it could be if they would just manage it a little bit better. And so in that presentation, we point out the different problems and solutions to those problems. Today we're going to tell some horror stories and some war stories about how we've seen these different things happen. Hi everyone, my name is Kevin Klein. I'm a longtime Microsoft SQL Server MVP. You can reach me on social media at KE Kline. So if you are on Twitter at KE Kline, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. I tend to speak on performance tuning and professional development topics for IT pros. Spoke at the spring SQL Cruise and hope to speak in 2016 as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Jes Borland. I am a SQL Server high performance, high availability consultant. You can reach me frequently on Twitter. My handle is girl, GRRL_geek, GEEK. I was lucky enough to be a technical lead on SQL Cruise Caribbean in 2015, where I talked about a couple of my favorite topics, automation, and what else did I talk about? I'm having a blank moment.
Didn't you do the tools overview?
I did, automation and tools. Those are a couple of my favorite topics. I'm also getting heavily into extended events, and I hope to see you at an event in the coming year, hopefully SQL Cruise 2016.
Hi everybody, my name is David Klee. I'm lucky enough to be both a Microsoft MVP and a VMware vExpert. You can reach me on Twitter at @KleeGeek, or just @KleeGeek. I also blog frequently about the convergence of infrastructure and database technologies. On the SQL Cruise Caribbean 2015, I spoke about performance tuning for both infrastructure and virtualization of high-performance SQL servers.
Grant, I think he's talking to you.
I know, I was muted. My name is Grant Fritsche. I am the Scary DBA. You can get a hold of me on Twitter at gfritchie. LinkedIn, it's Scary DBA. It's scarydba.com. I'm a SQL Server MVP, Dun & Bradstreet MVP, and generally a nuisance. I like to talk about query tuning. I like to talk about performance. I like to talk about development processes. And I write about them, books, articles, videos, you name it. I've done it. I talked at the Caribbean SQL Cruise on execution plans and a performance checklist, and I'll be doing the same talks at the SQL Cruise in the Mediterranean. So hopefully we can get together there and have a chat.
My name is Tim Ford. I'm not muted, and I have the luxury and the pleasure of being able to rope all of these individuals together and a few that aren't even represented by bringing them all on SQL Cruise. Brainstormed to put something like that together back in 2010, and it's now moving on to the 10th event that we've had since then over in the Mediterranean for the first time. Also have announced that our 2016 Caribbean event has gone live as well on a brand new ship that isn't even built yet. So I'm been given assurances it will be built by then, which is good. But we will have that new boat smell as well. So I have no filter, so I speak on just about any topic, SQL or otherwise. And while on the cruise, I spend most of my time herding these lovely cats around the ship, along with about 25 or so SQL cruisers there to learn during these sessions, as well as being able to do networking, consulting, and basically getting all their questions answered outside of class during our office hours. Also started this year is something we call the SQL Brain Trust, where we're able to go ahead and field questions from our sponsors like SQL Sentry or Redgate or Amazon that we can then take back to them after having some focus group sessions, which I was told by Grant and Kevin that's going to be of great value. So if you want to have your voice heard, not just with these individuals that are speaking, but also with the companies they represent in hopes of getting maybe some input into their product, that's another option, another reason for going on the cruise. You can find me on Twitter at SQLagentman.com, SQL Agent Man. I also write for SQL Mag and blog occasionally at theSQLAgentMan.com.
My name is Aaron Bertrand. I tweet at Aaron Bertrand, and I blog at SQLperformance.com and blogs.SQLsentry.com. I also write tips occasionally for mssqltips.com. And I enjoy long walks on European beaches. So this summer I will be on the Mediterranean version of SQL Cruise. I will give some presentations on both SQL Server 2000 features, or I'm sorry, SQL Server 2000, that would be bad. SQL Server 2014 features for non-enterprise customers. So a lot of the discussions that you see on the web are all about the enterprise edition features like Hackathon and changes to Always On. And I'm going to talk about what standard edition customers can actually benefit from. And then I also have a presentation on the TempDB Ultimate Performance Guide. So I will be there. This will be my 4th SQL Cruise, and I have a lot of fun on these events, and I'm looking forward to it.
Outstanding. Thank you, everyone. So today's session is about horror stories, lessons learned. Some people prefer the term war stories, right? Like we're all sitting in the office hours and we've got our favorite beverage of choice in our hand. We just start to tell stories about how things went horribly wrong, and sometimes how we learned some very, very important life lessons from when things go bad. And I would even put out the idea that I learn more from when things are going really hard than when they're going great. Anyone agree with me on that?
Oh, definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll start with a horror story that's not on the list of top 10 DBA mistakes, but you guys probably have a story like this of your own. And this is the story of how I learned about why transaction log backups were so incredibly important. It was in the very early days of SQL Server, back around between 6.0 and 6.5, so we're talking 1996 or so. And I was doing some work on a SQL Server late at night. It had had some problems, and it was a replicating server, and so in order to fix it, I actually had to tinker with the lock setting and the number of locks that you could set on a particular database. And this is also a time at which I learned how dangerous the GUI can be, as opposed to actually doing things via a script.
Once you've got a script that works, it's probably always going to work. You know, the versions of Transact SQL don't change that much over time. But I went in and I actually clicked on the wrong. It was 3 in the morning. You're sleepy. You're getting sloppy. I clicked on the wrong field and changed that number to 7,000. I don't even remember which field it was. Maybe it was max worker threads or something like that. And restarted SQL Server to put those into play. And guess what? Right, it was the wrong setting, and the server was even more messed up. And I had not been using, at that time, the transaction log backups very regularly. And so what do you do when you have a situation where you mess up the database, you can't get it rolling again, and all you have is a full backup? What happens then? That's when you find out how many people in the business don't approve of your backup decisions, right? Because they're yelling at you. They're like, "You mean I lost data from 12 from 12 a.m. all the way to 3 a.m. when you made?" It's like, yes, I'm sorry. Fortunately, we weren't, fully 24/7 at the time, so we didn't lose a lot of data, and it was only a couple of our smaller, less busy international offices. But we don't like it when we get yelled at, and so that was when I started to dig deeper into how can I make sure I have backups that happen, according to the RPO and the RTO, the recovery point objective, the recovery time objective. So we set a recovery time objective at that point to never lose more than 15 minutes of data under any circumstances. But that was one of those things where I'd never forget those lessons. Learn what the customer wants, right? And make sure that you have the means to recover from that. Does anyone have one of those crucial kind of, oh my God, this lesson was so hard, but I've never forgotten? Anybody want to share a story like that?
Well, actually, I just have a follow-up point to yours. So you were running in full recovery. You just hadn't taken a backup, a transactional log backup recently.
Right.
Without going into too much detail, imagine that similar situation, because probably you could have gone and done a tail of the log backup and then rolled forward to your point in time. But going back early on to when I started, and I didn't understand such a thing as a tail of the log backup, didn't understand such a thing as a transaction log backup. And I was still not even a DBA at that point, but they didn't have anybody in our environment that was. The system engineers managed our single SQL Server at that time. And they had something go belly up, and they needed to restore. And the server had been up for, to make the story interesting, we'll say 18 months. To make the story more interesting, we'll go ahead and talk about how they basically ran the log volume out of space because the transaction logs weren't getting truncated in this one database. And so we're talking at the time back in 1999 of this being, 100 gigs for a transaction log. And so, yeah, if I had known better, I probably could have tried to cut a tail of the log backup and then managed to restore the database and then roll forward 18 months worth of transactions. But instead, I figured, well, maybe if I just reboot the server, things will be better.
Oh, that fixes everything.
The interesting thing is, out of that though, is I ended up becoming a DBA out of that. That was basically the straw that broke the camel's back, with them having the sysadmin supporting the SQL Server, not just SQL Server, but the SQL Server. And that started my career in learning how to do things in SQL at the same time. So you mentioned earlier about learning when things go bad. Well, it's been a 15-year journey of learning based upon that initial time when things went really bad.
Yeah. Anyone want to share another story similar to that? A time when things were horrible, and it's a lesson you never forgot since then.
I've got one. It's not one I did, though, so I'm sharing it. I had a coworker who was doing a lot of work with the QA team, and the QA team frequently needed database refreshes, so they needed to, restore with clean data from production. And they were notorious for not getting offline quickly when they would ask for the data, but then not get offline. So my coworker got in the habit of, putting in set user restricted, rollback immediate, and then run restore. And so he would have it, do that automatically until the day that he's hooked up to production and did it, killing every single transaction on production all at the same time and starting the restore on the production database. And we only it was you heard them say out loud, "Oh, which server is this?" It was the beginning of the horror show. And so yeah, that was the first place where we started setting up different security for production servers and all that other fun stuff. But it's one of those I'll just never forget that. Which server is this?
In fact, a lot of the tools now are letting you color code, your connection, so that you can say red is production. So be sure you want to run that script on red.
Just make sure that the DBAs aren't colorblind, because if you have red for production and green for test, that could cause some problems for a lot of us.
Right.
In my bad habits session, I always talk about having your new query template in Management Studio start with begin transaction, and then your cursor goes right after begin transaction, and you can do that with Mlauden's SSMS tools pack. You can modify the new query template, and then have commit and rollback commented out below that. And so what I tell people is, when you're going to make ad hoc updates in production, make sure you use that, so that if you affect too many rows or delete without a where clause, that kind of thing, you can always roll it back. Well, it could also bite you the other way, where I've done that. I begin transaction, run the query, some delete query that deleted 10 rows or 100 rows, whatever, and I forget what the actual number was, but then I walked away. Forgot to commit. So I didn't commit. I didn't delete rows that I didn't expect to, and it wouldn't have. But I did lock the table and went to lunch, and that caused some issues.
Well, and plus you're talking about transaction logs. The transaction log won't back up past the last open transaction.
Right.
So it's possible to have a transaction log grow to an enormous size because somebody's got a transaction they left open for a long time, and then somebody else comes along, and it just keeps growing and growing. Yeah. Hijinks ensue, right?
And that's a good point, because I don't think a lot of people realize that. And it's a good thing that you highlighted that as well, too.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's great about your story, Tim, is how you were working with the business people. The business people kind of didn't really understand how important it was to have a trained person on the staff that, that really knew databases. And we have so many business environments in which, it's an accidental DBA that's in charge of that aspect of data management. And one of the things that I put forward as one of the major mistakes that DBAs have caused as a mistake in their career is to not really understand the business that they work for, and not to understand, and to counter that, I would say, if you think about a network admin, for them, the main thing they work with are IP addresses and routes and things like that. But for them, a TCP/IP packet is a TCP/IP packet. It doesn't matter if they're working for a radiology firm or if they're working for the biggest floral company in America. If you're an exchange person, you could be working for lawyers, you could be working for doctors, or you could be working for a plumbing supply company. You're just managing that email and keeping it going. But if you're a database administrator, you work for a radiologist, and your data gets corrupted, people's lives could be impacted by that. If you're a database administrator and you work with highly transactional, flower orders, that's a different kind of business. And so by knowing your business really well, you have a much deeper contribution you can make to the business overall. Anybody have a story about maybe some mistakes, a horror story about misunderstanding the business, or something related to working with the business people and some kind of new epiphany you had about that?
I've got one that is probably the scariest moment as a DBA that I've ever had. I was doing some infrastructure work at a hospital a little while back, and I was told to take everything down at midnight to do some routine maintenance. I was there over the week, and about 11:45 I decided, something's just not right. So I'm just going to walk around, make sure everything looks okay before I take things down. So I'm walking around, I do a lap, and I decide to just take another one. As I'm walking back, somebody's being wheeled into the emergency room. I go back there and just kind of poke around the corner, and the ER manager tells me it's okay to take everything down, just go do it. The person is sitting there and unresponsive, some sort of a drug overdose. They couldn't speak. So something told me, just don't take everything down. Just wait, relax. Come to find out, this person had a drug allergy for the drug that they were about to administer, and if I'd taken the system down, they would not have been able to see that the person had the drug allergy. Whoa. And the problem probably would have killed them. Wow. So that was probably the single scariest moment I've ever had as a DBA. So I didn't take everything down, accidentally saved somebody's life, and waited. I waited until everything was good, and then I took it down, got some maintenance done. But just wow. The next day I found out about that, and it really freaked me out.
Sure.
So I've been a healthcare DBA for 15 years, and to hear that, there's parts of my body that just tightened up when right now. We have a saying where I'm from that good data saves lives. Mm-hmm. The lack of data takes lives. And to have what you just mentioned, where you're talking about having one individual say, take it down, is absolute insanity. Now, I'm not sure how long ago that took place, but, in today's world, the level of change control process that we need to go through for anything that even remotely affects not just patient care, but even credit information, even in healthcare, is a burdensome process. And we as IT folks see it as a burden, but there is a very good reason for why you go through all of these steps, and you have multiple eyes look at things, and you have environments that are set up so that you either have high availability through AGs, through mirroring, through SRM, if you're talking about VMware. You have these multiple environments set up so that you're not just cutting somebody's lifeline when you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Since then, the hospital that I was at implemented proper SQL Server and application high availability. Mm. And it was because I pushed them after that experience.
Sure. Here's a. Oh, I'm sorry, Jess. Where are you going to go?
I was going to say, yeah. On a smaller scale, but still related to knowing the business, my first accidental DBA job, so it was for a franchising company, which that's not nearly the level of human life of a hospital or healthcare, but we answered to 300 small business owners, and our system was their lifeline, right? If we were down for an entire weekend, that was an entire weekend of their admin time, of them being able to enter orders and being able to do work. And we were trying to replace a cluster. It was a cluster. But we had planned an outage on Friday night into Saturday night. So we had planned for 24 hours. We got into the data center on Friday night, and the sysadmin that I was working with realized there was something wrong with the networking and equipment, and we wouldn't be able to install the new servers and switch over to the new cluster. And he had much more experience than I did. I was like, it's okay, we can work through it. We're young and we're here all weekend. We can just be down as long as we need to. And he said, no, I think we should take a step back. I think we should call Dell and talk to them. So we step out of the data center. He spends a couple hours on the phone and made the decision not to pull out the old servers and wait for new networking equipment and spend an entire weekend of downtime. At that time, I was like, well, now you've wasted 2 of my weekends because, I'm down here this weekend at the data center. We're going to have to be down in a couple weeks again when the actual networking equipment comes. But on Monday, in review with the CEO and the CFO and some of our business owners that were on the project team, they were incredibly grateful because we had no idea how long we would have been down, and this prevented that for them. So I learned a lesson there that it's not always what the IT department wants. It's not always what the DBA wants. It really is something that you have to answer to the business owners for.
You know, that's a great point, and I know Grant has been talking a lot about cloud, so maybe you can tell us a story about, but one of the things that DBAs are looked to is to be able to translate all of this technology into a business value proposition. You know, so people, or the inverse of that will happen. So sometimes you'll have a really unreasonable set of expectations coming from the business side, and you are the person who has to come back and say, yeah, we can do what you're asking for, but it's going to cost 8 times more than you thought it would. You know, and I'll give a quick example of my own case where I, you know, have done performance tuning, particularly on the hardware, the bare metal side, for a long, long time. And I was working with a customer who's one of the world's biggest floral companies, and we were sizing hardware. And I was really shocked because I hadn't analyzed the business very much. I didn't know what was going on with the business very much. And I didn't realize that 90% of the transactions that they have in a given year happen in 2 months, the month before Mother's Day and the month before Valentine's Day, right? So when you're sizing hardware, it has to be enormous for those 2 periods of time. The rest of the year could be tiny. And that's one where I wrote answers, the rules of thumb about how to build out your performance, and did not realize how elastic their requirements were. One day it could be tiny, and then the next day enormous, and made a huge, basically I made some big mistakes because I didn't understand what kind of cost implications that would have for their business. And I know people are saying the same sort of things about cloud. What kind of stuff are you hearing on that end of the spectrum, Grant?
Well, I mean, the whole idea of the cloud is you know, that expandable capacity. I mean, it's you know, pay for what you use, you know, and get what you need. I mean, I worked for an insurance company. We had the same situation because insurance, you know, I mean, there's an ongoing flow of incoming information, right? So, I mean, you know, you think, oh well, this transactions are pretty standard, but then there's renewals at the end of the year. And the year being defined by the business, right? Not by you. Not it's like, oh, it's December, we're going to renew. It's no December. At least in my case, renewals were in February. You'll get that massive spike, and it was back in the day. It was very hard to deal with. But now, what I'm hearing is more and more people are, you know, going with the idea that, you know, well, if we set up our databases correctly, you know, if we take the time to partition on the places we need to partition, we can simply throw servers at the problem, pay for them short term, right? Only use what we need for, you know, from Amazon or Azure, and you know, and then come rolling back again. I mean, and I've seen that going on a lot, more and more, at least for the places that are able to or willing to, you know, embrace the cloud. I mean, and that's the real question, is whether or not people are gonna look into it. I mean, but that comes back around to DBAs and data professionals, is whether or not you know what's available and whether or not you've got the capabilities at hand to make that happen. And that's all around your own learning, not the business itself. The business is going to come up with these needs, and you've got to be able to supply, you know, good answers. Mm-hmm. And it's more about your knowledge and not their, you know, not necessarily their needs. Although it does bring up the, you talked earlier about the RPO, RTO. It's one of my favorite things, is because anytime you go up to a business and say, okay, so the recovery point objective, how much data are you willing to lose? The answer is always
none.
Yes, everyone knows the correct answer, none. Right? And you say, okay, well, here's the cost. Here are the number of zeros.
Right.
For as close as we can get to none, and suddenly the negotiation begins. Well, okay, we can't pay that much. So what will 5 minutes cost us? What will 10 minutes cost us? And then you make those adjustments from there. I mean, but again, that all comes back to the DBA's knowledge of the business is vastly important. I mean, I've heard people say, look, I don't care. It's ones and zeros. I'll move anything I have to move, and it just always amazes me because it's just so wrong.
And you bring up a great point, too. Another thing that I know I see all the time, and we tend to see it a little less because we speak, all of us speak at conferences so much, that the people that are there are in a kind of that I want to learn state of mind. But, you know, when we get a chance to visit with the folks out in the industry, we walk around the offices and we talk to people, we find that the people that are at the conferences are that 1 in 5 people who really care.
Right.
And then the other 4, well, you know, 2 of them are kind of interested a little bit. They'll read, they'll check blogs, but then you've got the others who just don't seem to, you know, they're incurious and they just don't seem to care at all. Anyone have any experiences like that?
You mean my last company?
You're right.
I'll get in trouble for that one.
I was actually contacted on LinkedIn or Facebook by someone who I was going to see at my, I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, at my 30-year high school reunion. Jess, you're not even 30 years old, are you? So,
barely not.
Okay, so you were a baby when I was graduating high school, But so this guy reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, I'm a DBA," and I was, you know, thinking about all my old classmates, and I see that I actually own a book that you've written. And I thought it'd be cool to, you know, to just say hi and tell you I'm a DBA too. And I was like, "Well, that's neat. What are you doing? You know, what are you learning? And what are you working on?" He's like, "Oh, you know, I've been doing the same thing for 7 years." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, and I like it. I don't really want to change." And I thought, I can understand that because change is hard and takes a lot of energy. But on the other hand, boy, that's going to hurt you in a business that is driven by version numbers.
All right. Well, I hope that was fun and informative for you. For more information, be sure to check out our performance tuning and optimization blog. It's all about how to make SQL Server perform better. That's SQLperformance.com, and it's something that Aaron is keeping up with every day. We also have free query tuning consultations. You can go to answers.sqlperformance.com, and you can provide us with your various execution plans, and we will provide you with some help in order to make them perform better. If you haven't seen the source video that these different horror stories episodes are based on, take a look at it at SQL Century TV. There's the full URL there, but there's lots of other great videos on SQLcentury.tv, so we encourage you to look at all of those. And of course, you can reach Aaron and myself at our email addresses. You can go to our web pages on SQLcentury.com. And of course, we'd love to get in touch with you on social media. So we hope that you'll follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. So with that, thank you, and hope to see you on our next edition.